Hello and welcome to the Monster Painter. This time I dig through this bag of thrift store junk looking for fun things for my tabletop games. And so here we have our bag of thrift store goodies clocking in at $6. Yes, inflation has even affected the thrift stores. And the baggie is full of all sorts of stuff. Some of it is obviously of no use for our purposes, and some of it is very obviously useful for tabletop gaming. And of course, some of it might be useful, but it will require a bit of work to get it ready. Let's take a closer look. Oh wait, there's an unboxing within this unboxing. These two strange containers contain still more toys. They appear to be weird smushy toys. Soft foam rubber things, out of scale, too soft, and far too cute to be of any use in the very serious grimdark of a proper tabletop game. Equally unsuitable, we have these plastic bits, part of a Cinderella coach toy, I think. Maybe there's some potential, but it's not worth the effort. And the same goes for this broken chattering teeth toy. Methinks these are headed to the trash. Now this thing, from what is shaping up to be a fragment of a Disney Cinderella playset, has some real potential. I'm not sure what to do with the facade, but it's nice enough to keep off into the parts bin with it. The top part, however, has me inspired, and I'm making some plans for it. All of this stuff is the wrong scale. And while the spinning wheel could have been repurposed, unfortunately it is very rubbery and soft and not worth the effort. The big gem on the pillow isn't bad, but it's really big. It's the wrong scale, so all of this stuff is off to the thrift store. The last dud of the lot is the top of a castle tower. Sure, it has potential, but meh. Now, on to the good stuff. Prince Charming's castle is really starting to deliver. These pillars are fantastic. The clock tower is a little tall, and all three are as tippy as a Friday night. These stairs are an excellent scale with a ton of utility. They appear to be part of a Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles playset, and feature that great Renaissance sculptor Donatello. The second set of stairs looks great as well. A little less utility than Donnie's set, but a very good scale. And they have something every tabletop gamer loves: modularity! Throw in a couple of doors and you have a piece with lots of tactical interest and a whole lot of potential. The standout pieces have to be this collection of dollhouse furniture. The scale is just right. The theming is perfect for fantasy gaming. They are so good you could use them as is without painting them. Of course, I'm not going to do that, but you could. Yep, these 5 pieces are well worth the price of the whole bag on their own. I couldn't be more pleased. Alright, some of these toys are going to require a little editing. Donnie's stairwell has a bit that allowed it to attach to the rest of the playset, and that part has got to go. I'm going to chew at it with the snips and then shave it down with the utility knife. I'm also going to remove the ball thingy from the top of the thing from the castle facade. As well, I'm going to cut off one of the triangles to make the whole thing look a little less symmetrical. Now I have to try and cut down that way too tall clock tower. It's going to be tricky, and I have to avoid breaking the whole thing apart. In retrospect, there is probably a much better method than attacking the poor thing with the snips and the utility knife. Oh well, what's done is done. With the clock tower cut down to a more convincing size, it's time to put it back together. The two parts have valiantly resisted being glued together, so I have to take the extra step of pinning the blessed thing. This will give the piece a much more solid bond and it should be able to stand up to the rigors of the tabletop now. So these flaming columns used to light up. This no longer functions, and I am not a fan of lighting effects anyway. I do, however, want to remove and dispose of the batteries from these things. Nasty little batteries that would only cause problems anyway. The last step before I start priming and painting up all this stuff is to give the lot a good scuffing with some sandpaper. Plastic toys can sometimes fight the primer, and roughing up the surface will always help that sticky old gesso stick to these old toys so much better. Time to get the painting started. For the most part, everything is getting a straightforward paint job. Nothing too fancy for this stuff, just the kind of thing you would expect for this sort of scatter terrain. I have, however, painted the triangle things a nice bright teal because I have something different in mind for them. My intention for these plastic triangles is to make them into an ice barrier. They could just as easily be made into crystals for a cave crawl, but my favorite game is Frostgrave, and ice fits quite nicely into the frozen city. So, ice it is. To this end, I will apply a dry brush layer of light blue, a mixture of manganese blue and titanium white. This will help bring out the forms of our ice crystals. Next, I'm going to take an even lighter mixture of cobalt blue and titanium white and add an edge highlight to all the forms of these ice crystals. The model is very, very simple, and this step will add interest, bring out the forms, and reinforce the icy nature of this chunk of plastic. The final step for our ice crystals is a gradated wash of ultramarine blue along the bottom edge of the model. This adds interest and reinforces the watery nature of ice crystals. With that, I think I have some quite convincing, if very stylized, ice crystal models. Perfect for the frozen city of Old Felstad. Now, let's see what's going on with all those other models. So I chip away at all the other stuff, and it's coming together quite nicely. They are definitely a fun and useful variety of dungeon furniture and scatter terrain. The nice thing about toys are they're very, very durable. After all, they are meant to be handled by small children, and small children will test the breaking point of just about anything. Now, let's look at the finished products. First up is our big chunk of stylized ice, and I'm very pleased. It definitely looks cold and icy, and I don't think it will have any trouble fitting into the frozen city of Old Felstad. It is a very suitable bit of terrain for Frostgrave. On to staircase number 1. It has a bit of a sci-fi post-apocalyptic vibe to it, but I can still see it being used as a dungeon entrance or as stairs between dungeon levels. The proportions of the steps make it very useful in wargaming, giving this terrain piece a lot of tactical interest. I can see it being a very, very useful piece of terrain. On to staircase number 2, and it's an interesting pair of parts. It offers a lot of options and a full-on medieval fantasy look. While you can't place models on the stairs, it still has a lot of tactical interest with those doors and that arch. I feel like this thing is going to see plenty of table time in upcoming games. It's time for column number 1, or the clock tower. I'm glad I cut it down. Unfortunately, my repair job is less than perfect and the thing looks a little wonky. Fortunately, it will end up in the ruins of Frostgrave, so I will beg off the problems as the ravages of time. As a terrain piece, it is distinctive and unusual, and so perfectly suited to my tastes. As they say in the Frozen City, all the columns are trying to kill you. Some of them are just taking their sweet time. Next up are column number 2 and column number 3, a pair of pillars with pyres on fire. They are very dramatic and well suited for narrative campaign events. Of course, they will be ending up in Frostgrave as the kind of columns that are clearly trying to kill you with blasts of elemental energy. Alright, on to the furniture, starting with the matching pair of thrones. They are quite stylized, but still very convincing, and they painted up really well. They are a classic pair of medieval fantasy props and represent the perfect place for a pompous person to place their posterior. The royal set of chairs is rounded out by this seat. It's a lot less stylized than the thrones and looks like the perfect place for a princess to sit while she's at court. Thrones are a fairly common bit of dungeon scatter terrain, but I don't have a piece like this. It is quite a convincing royal chair and a welcome addition to the collection. With this cute little table, I primed it with matte medium rather than gesso, my go-to primer. I did this to preserve the glorious graphic on the top. I added a wash and a dusty dry brush to weather it a bit, and it was finished lickety-split. It is a beautiful round table, but not really big enough to be Artherion. Finally, we have come to this big potted plant. There is a bit of a gap between the urn and the foliage, but it's a tough toy and it was not going to budge. It's not noticeable on the tabletop, so I decided it was best not to fuss with it. It's a rather magnificent shrubbery and would make an excellent sacrifice to conclude an arduous and epic quest. There you have it. $6 worth of thrift store junk converted into a dandy selection of dungeon furniture and scatter terrain. Well worth it, I think. Now, dear viewers, I have an exciting new proposal for you. Okay, hear me out. A Star Wars themed restaurant called the Tandalorian.
It's hard to believe anyone would eat at a Star Wars themed Indian restaurant.
Indeed. And you know what else is hard to believe?
Oh, great. Here we go.
It's hard to believe that 50 years ago today, Jimi Hendrix was kidnapped by the Moon Nazis.
What the hell are you talking about?
Well, I did say it was hard to believe, didn't I?
Enough of this nonsense. It's time for a monster fight. Yeah, monster fight.
Tonight's fight features a Battle Master Beastman. He's a plastic model from that venerable 1991 game, Battle Masters, versus a Yellow Tau Man-at-Arms. A crazily converted 40k model from the least fighty of all the factions. Who will win? Let the dice decide! Oh, wow. That result's really gonna stir up the pot. In the most shocking match of the season, the Yellow Tau Man-at-Arms is victorious. I build a boat for my buddy.
Remember to like,
Comment,
Subscribe.
and ring the bell. Ring the bell!
Watching Less the Monster Painter.